When a woman chooses to live alone, the world often rushes to interpret her, some with admiration, some with suspicion, and some with complete misunderstanding. Yet the truth is far more profound than the simple image of solitude. A woman living alone is not a woman who lacks something. She is a woman who has stepped into an inner landscape few dare to explore. She moves through life not with the noise of dependence, but with the quiet strength of a person who has encountered herself. To live alone is not merely a lifestyle choice, it is a psychological calling. It demands an inner stability and a willingness to face the self without distraction. Many live among crowds yet feel empty. She chooses silence and finds fullness. The emptiness others fear becomes her sanctuary. In that stillness, she hears her own voice, not the expectations of society or the echo of another person's desires. She discovers that solitude is not a punishment, but an initiation. A woman who lives alone learns quickly that independence is not about rejecting companionship. It is about refusing to lose herself in it. She understands the deeper rhythms of her own energy. She knows when she is expanding, when she is contracting, when she is drifting, and when she is awakening. Her life becomes a mirror, one that reflects her fears, her passions, her wounds, and her hidden strengths. What others may call loneliness, she experiences as intimacy with the soul. In the quiet rooms of her home, she encounters the parts of herself that were once buried beneath the need to be needed. She learns that she is not defined by who she pleases, supports, satisfies, or nurtures. She is defined by her relationship with her own inner world. And in that relationship, she discovers dimensions of power that emerge only when one stops seeking permission to exist. A woman who lives alone often carries a kind of seriousness that others misread. They might think she is guarded, difficult, or uninterested in connection. But this seriousness is the expression of a person who has learned to value her own time, her own inner equilibrium, and her own emotional boundaries. She does not open her door to chaos. She has learned to differentiate between those who come to share energy and those who come to drain it. The truth is that her solitude is not rigid, it is selective. She may welcome people into her life, but she no longer feels compelled to surrender her stability to anyone. When she chooses love, it is with awareness. When she walks away, it is with clarity. She no longer needs someone to complete her because she has already walked through the terrain of her own incompleteness and discovered its lessons. There is also a quiet fearlessness in her. Living alone means she has met her vulnerabilities without a shield. She knows what keeps her awake at night, what triggers her insecurities, what awakens her desire, and what strengthens her intuition. Her emotional intelligence sharpens because she has spent nights wrestling with truths that many hide behind companionship. She understands herself not through theory, but through direct experience. Such a woman is often misjudged by those who have never tasted solitude. They assume she is lonely, bitter, or incapable of love. Yet these judgments reveal more about the observers than about her. Her life is not a reaction against men, it is an affirmation of her own inner autonomy. She does not reject connection, she rejects dependence that costs her identity. The truth is that she lives with an awareness of her own wholeness. And when a person knows their own wholeness, they can love without fear, connect without losing themselves, and walk away without shattering. Her solitude is the crucible through which she forged this strength. A woman who lives alone is not missing anyone, she is meeting herself. She is building a relationship with her soul that many never develop. She is learning to sit with silence until it speaks, learning to sit with emotions until they soften, learning to sit with truth until it transforms her. And in doing so, she becomes a woman who cannot be possessed, controlled, manipulated, or diminished. She becomes someone who enters relationships not from need, but from abundance. The truth about women who live alone is that they embody a rare form of psychological courage. They show the world that fulfillment is not reserved for those who attach themselves to another, but also for those who are willing to stand alone and grow from within. They remind us that wholeness is not something granted, it is something discovered. And so, when you see a woman living alone, do not assume she lacks anything. Understand instead that she has chosen a path that demands inner depth, emotional clarity, and spiritual strength. She is not avoiding life, she is shaping it from the inside out. Her solitude is not the absence of love, it is the presence of self. The woman who lives alone discovers a depth of self that only silence can reveal. When the world around her grows quiet, when no one else's voice fills the room and no external presence shapes the rhythm of her day, she steps into an inner landscape that most people never approach. Silence for her is not an absence but a presence, a living space where layers of her psyche rise to the surface. She begins to see the fragments of herself that were once blurred by expectations, obligations, or the constant pressure to play roles that never truly belonged to her. In the stillness of her own home, she is no longer defined by what she must be for others. She is defined by what emerges from within. This is a journey that unfolds slowly, sometimes painfully, sometimes beautifully, as she learns to sit with emotions that were once avoided, fears that were once denied, and strengths she never recognized when life was crowded with noise and movement. In this quiet space, she learns the subtle language of her own thoughts. She becomes aware of what nourishes her and what drains her, what awakens her passion and what dims her inner flame. During the moments when she walks from room to room with no voice interrupting her flow, she begins to feel the weight of her own presence. She notices how her mind reacts to stillness, how her emotions shift like weather across the internal skies, how memories surface without warning. Some memories arrive gently, reminding her of joy and growth, while others come like ghosts she had long forgotten. Yet even these ghosts teach her something essential about who she has become and what she still carries deep inside her. Instead of running from them, she meets them, because there is nowhere else to run. This meeting with herself becomes a kind of inner dialogue that shapes her understanding of her past and her relationship with the person she is becoming. As she spends more time in solitude, she discovers an unexpected truth. Silence is not empty, it is full of messages. There are moments when she feels the weight of unspoken emotions sitting beside her like a quiet companion. At other times, she feels a spark of creativity rising within her, a desire to write, create, imagine, or transform something in her life. Without the constant presence of another person's needs or demands, she begins to notice that she has needs of her own that were long neglected. She may feel the urge to rebuild forgotten dreams, to pursue desires that once seemed unrealistic, or to confront parts of herself that were overshadowed by the rhythm of relationships. Living alone gives her the space to explore these forgotten territories deeply, without fear of judgment or misunderstanding. There are evenings when solitude feels like a mirror, and in that mirror she sees not just her reflection but her essence. She observes how she reacts to discomfort, how she handles uncertainty, how she soothes herself when life becomes heavy. She learns that she is far stronger than she ever realized, not because she avoids vulnerability, but because she faces it directly. She discovers that resilience is not loud. It grows quietly in the moments when she chooses to stay with her discomfort instead of seeking distraction. In this intimate environment, she begins to understand what it means to trust herself, to rely on her own emotional intelligence, and to cultivate a sense of inner grounding that does not depend on the presence or approval of anyone else. As she moves through her days, she also begins to notice the subtle shifts in her awareness. She hears her intuition more clearly because it is no longer drowned out by the expectations or opinions of others. Her intuition becomes a guide, a whisper that directs her toward what aligns with her inner truth and warns her away from what threatens her balance. She becomes more in tune with the sensations in her body, the movements of her thoughts, the deeper impulses of her soul. She develops a sensitivity to her own internal signals that allows her to navigate life with a heightened sense of presence and clarity. This awareness becomes a form of quiet power, shaping the decisions she makes and the boundaries she establishes. As she continues in this way of living, she notices how deeply she begins to value her own company. She learns to enjoy the rituals of her daily life, making tea in the morning, rearranging her space, reading in silence, walking at her own pace, choosing how she spends her time without compromise. These simple rituals become meaningful because they belong entirely to her. She realizes that her home is not just a physical space. It is a psychological space where she builds her identity, nurtures her emotional health, and strengthens her inner foundation. Her home becomes an extension of her spirit, a place where she can retreat, reflect, and regenerate. Solitude also forces her to confront aspects of herself that might have remained hidden had she been constantly surrounded by others. She encounters her impatience, her fears, her insecurities, her unresolved wounds, but instead of turning away, she gradually learns how to understand them. She begins to differentiate between what is real and what is inherited from past experiences, old relationships, or societal expectations. She becomes skilled at discerning which emotions belong to her and which were borrowed or imposed. This clarity reshapes her sense of self, helping her recognize her own authenticity beneath the layers of conditioning. With time, she becomes more grounded in her own identity. She no longer feels the pressure to perform, impress, or conform. She becomes comfortable with the parts of herself that others might not understand or accept. She learns that she can exist without constantly being validated by a partner, a relationship, or an external attachment. This realization frees her from the subtle fear of abandonment that many carry silently. She learns that she cannot abandon herself, and that is the deepest security she can ever know. When she interacts with the world after cultivating such inner depth, she does so with a sharper sense of awareness. She is more selective about the energies she allows into her life. She recognizes superficial connections instantly and no longer feels compelled to entertain them. Her solitude teaches her patience, self-respect, and discernment, making her presence both calm and unshakable. The world may misinterpret her independence as aloofness, but in truth, it is the expression of a soul that has learned to protect its own equilibrium. In this way, the woman who lives alone does not live in isolation from life. She lives in contact with herself. She becomes someone who understands the language of her inner world deeply, someone who can navigate silence without fear, someone who discovers the hidden layers of her own being in ways that transform her from within. Solitude becomes her sanctuary where she learns emotional clarity and inner strength. When she steps into a life shaped by her own presence, rather than the demands or expectations of another, she discovers that solitude is not a void but a living environment that reflects her emotional landscape with striking honesty. She begins to notice how her feelings rise and fall without interference, how her thoughts take shape without being overshadowed, how her inner rhythm becomes more distinct and truthful. The quiet becomes a companion rather than a threat, creating a space where she can explore the full spectrum of her emotions without interruption. In this sanctuary, she begins to understand the difference between being alone and being lonely, realizing that loneliness is the absence of connection, while solitude is the presence of self. This distinction becomes a guiding force as she navigates the deep waters of her own emotional world. When she is alone, she has the time to observe her reactions with a clarity that is difficult to achieve in the noise of constant companionship. She sees how a memory triggers a certain emotion, how an old wound still holds energy, how a hope quietly shapes her decisions. Solitude allows her to trace the origin of her emotions back to their roots. She recognizes when her feelings stem from past experiences, when they arise from unmet needs, and when they come from the authentic core of her being. This emotional clarity becomes a kind of internal compass, helping her navigate life with greater wisdom. Instead of being overwhelmed by her emotions, she learns to interpret them as signals, each one carrying a message about what she needs, what she fears, and what she values. Her sanctuary of solitude also helps her develop emotional resilience. Without another person to buffer the difficult moments or distract her from discomfort, she learns how to sit with pain without running from it. She begins to understand that avoidance only delays growth, while presence invites transformation. In the quiet space of her home, she discovers she can withstand sadness, face insecurity, and move through uncertainty because she is forced to meet these inner experiences directly. This process is not always gentle, but it is deeply empowering. Each time she faces a difficult emotion and remains grounded, she builds a new layer of strength within herself. This strength is not loud or forceful, it is subtle, steady, rooted in an understanding of her own emotional landscape. Solitude teaches her the art of emotional self-regulation. She learns how to soothe herself when anxiety rises, how to ground herself when fear surfaces, how to encourage herself when doubt whispers in her mind. She discovers that she does not need someone else to stabilize her. She can become her own source of comfort, clarity, and grounding. This realization becomes one of the most liberating aspects of her journey. She begins to trust herself in ways she never could when she depended on others for validation or reassurance. With each moment of emotional self-care, she strengthens her internal foundation, becoming a woman who can face life with a calm confidence. There are moments in her solitude when she feels emotions that once would have overwhelmed her, yet now she experiences them with a sense of spaciousness. Instead of being consumed by them, she observes them. This observational distance allows her to separate her identity from her emotions. She realizes that she is not her fear, not her sadness, not her doubts. She is the consciousness capable of witnessing them. This shift in perspective deepens her emotional intelligence, allowing her to respond to life's challenges with greater clarity. She becomes aware of how fleeting emotions really are, how they move like waves through the inner ocean but never define its depth. This awareness gives her a profound sense of stability, a groundedness that cannot be easily shaken. As she lives alone, she begins to understand her emotional triggers more clearly. She sees what frustrates her, what overwhelms her, what brings her peace, what lights up her spirit, and what drains her energy. She starts seeing patterns that once went unnoticed in the noise of relational life. She notices how certain thoughts create tension in her body, how certain memories ignite insecurity, how certain desires spark enthusiasm. With this awareness, she becomes more capable of reshaping her emotional patterns, letting go of what no longer serves her. She learns to choose emotional responses that align with her values instead of reacting impulsively. Her solitude becomes a laboratory for emotional transformation, where she experiments with new ways of thinking, feeling, and being. In this sanctuary, she also develops a refined sense of emotional boundaries. She becomes acutely aware of the difference between what she genuinely wants and what she once accepted out of obligation or fear. She learns how to say no without guilt, how to honor her own needs without apologizing, how to protect her emotional energy from people or situations that destabilize her. Her solitude teaches her that boundaries are not walls, but expressions of self-respect. She becomes more selective with the people she allows into her life, valuing quality over quantity, authenticity over attachment. When she eventually chooses to let someone in, it is a conscious choice, not a desperate need. Over time, she realizes that her solitude has become a mirror, reflecting the truth of who she really is. She sees her strengths clearly, not because someone praises her, but because she experiences them firsthand. She recognizes her vulnerabilities without shame, because she has faced them alone and survived. She begins to value qualities within herself that she once overlooked. Her compassion, her intuition, her creativity, her resilience, her independence. These aspects grow more vivid in the quiet space she has created. As she becomes more emotionally clear, she also becomes more connected to her inner wisdom. She begins to trust the subtle guidance that arises from within, the instinct that tells her when to move forward, when to hold back, when to let go, when to embrace. Her decisions become more aligned with her authentic nature. She no longer makes choices out of fear, societal pressure, or the desire for approval. Her solitude has shown her that inner truth is far more reliable than external influence. Through all of this, she discovers that emotional clarity is a form of freedom. It frees her from the need to be understood by everyone, from the pressure to fit into expectations that do not align with her, from the internal turmoil that once dictated her decisions. Her solitude becomes a sacred space where she grows not away from the world, but toward herself. She emerges stronger, wiser, and more grounded because she has learned to face her emotional world with courage, honesty, and grace. She chooses connection consciously, no longer losing herself in the expectations of others. When she stands rooted in her solitude, she begins to understand that connection is not something to fall into blindly, but something to enter with awareness, intention, and self-respect. Her past may hold moments where she dissolved parts of herself to keep peace, to be loved, to be chosen. But now she recognizes how easily one can disappear into the desires of another when one does not yet know their own. Living alone has taught her that relationships without self-awareness are traps disguised as comfort. So she becomes deliberate, thoughtful, attentive to the subtle cues of her own inner voice, choosing relationships not out of hunger, but out of alignment. She realizes that she no longer needs someone to hold her up, because she has learned how to stand firmly on her own emotional ground. and this shifts everything about how she relates to others. She begins to observe people differently. She notices their patterns, their intentions, their emotional languages, the energy they carry into a room. She sees when someone approaches her out of genuine care and when they approach out of expectation or neediness. She becomes sensitive to the difference between someone who wants to walk with her and someone who wants to lean on her. Her intuition, sharpened by solitude, becomes her quiet guide. She no longer feels compelled to accommodate people who drain her. Instead, she protects her time and energy as if they were sacred resources, because for her, they are. Her solitude has shown her how valuable inner peace truly is, and she refuses to sacrifice it for connections that pull her away from herself. The more she grows into her independence, the more she understands that real connection begins with authenticity. She is done performing. She no longer pretends to be less sensitive, less intelligent, less ambitious, or less complex to make someone else comfortable. She knows that any relationship built on self-reduction is a relationship built on illusion. So she brings her full self into interactions not as a demand, but as a quiet declaration of who she is. Those capable of meeting her authenticity with their own remain. Those who find her depth intimidating drift away. She does not chase, because she understands now that true connection cannot be forced, negotiated, or manipulated. It must arise naturally from mutual truth. Her boundaries become clearer. She senses immediately when someone tries to project their expectations onto her. She recognizes when someone approaches with a fantasy instead of genuine curiosity. She has lived long enough with herself to know that she is not responsible for fulfilling someone else's idea of who she should be. She refuses to shrink into a role. She refuses to be molded into convenience. She no longer tolerates emotional imbalance or relational confusion. If someone wants access to her life, they must meet her where she stands, not where they want her to stand. This level of clarity allows her to form healthier, more honest, and more meaningful connections. She also becomes aware of the importance of reciprocity. She has spent enough time giving without receiving to understand how draining one-sided emotional labor can be. Now she notices whether someone matches her effort or merely benefits from it. She observes whether someone listens with presence or simply waits for their turn to speak. She pays attention to whether someone respects her time, honors her boundaries, and acknowledges her humanity. These observations are not judgments. They are tools of discernment that protect her from repeating old patterns of self-abandonment. The woman she is now will not sacrifice her emotional well-being for a relationship that does not nourish her. She has grown beyond that. With this new awareness, her connections become deeper and more meaningful. She gravitates toward people who value truth, introspection, stability, and emotional maturity. She is drawn to those who understand that relationships are not places to hide from oneself, but places to reveal oneself more fully. She finds comfort in conversations that explore the unseen, the unspoken, the internal. She feels alive in relationships that encourage growth, not conformity. And because she no longer enters relationships with the unconscious hope of being completed, she connects with others from a place of wholeness rather than need. This transforms the quality of her relationships, making them grounded, honest, and free from the distortions of hidden insecurities. She becomes more deliberate about the pace of connection. Instead of rushing into closeness, she allows it to unfold gradually. She has learned that intimacy is not measured by speed, but by depth. She gives herself time to observe, to understand, to feel. She allows silence to reveal what words often conceal. She watches how someone behaves when things are easy and when things are difficult. She notices how they handle discomfort, whether they communicate with sincerity, whether their actions align with their promises. She chooses connection with patience because she knows that nothing valuable grows from haste. Her solitude has taught her that time is the great revealer, and she lets it speak before she opens her heart fully. She becomes empowered not by detachment but by discernment. She does not fear love, she fears losing herself again. But because she now understands the patterns that once led her into self-sacrifice, she no longer repeats them unconsciously. She walks into relationships with awareness of her own needs, her own values, her own emotional landscape. She knows what she can offer and what she cannot. She knows what she desires and what she refuses to tolerate. This clarity makes her presence in relationships more intentional, more grounded, more genuine. The beauty of her self-awareness is that it allows her to love more deeply, not less. Because she no longer fears being consumed by someone else's expectations, she can express herself freely. She can care without losing her boundaries, give without abandoning her needs, love without betraying her identity. Her connections become richer because they are chosen, not compelled. They are built from her truth, not her fear. She enters relationships as a whole person, not as someone searching for completion, and this changes everything about the way she experiences connection. Through all of this, she learns that choosing connection consciously is not a rejection of others, but an act of self-honoring. It is a recognition that her heart is a sacred space and not everyone is meant to enter it. It is an understanding that the right connections do not require her to silence herself, sacrifice herself, or shape herself into someone else's comfort. It is the realization that meaningful connection begins when she chooses from clarity instead of loneliness, from strength instead of insecurity, from maturity instead of impulse. And so she moves through the world with a quiet confidence, offering her presence not to those who demand it, but to those who can truly meet it, choosing connection not as escape, but as a conscious extension of the self she has found within her solitude. Her independence reflects a wholeness that makes her love richer, freer, and rooted in self-awareness. As she walks the path shaped by solitude, she begins to understand that independence is not a shield she hides behind, nor a rebellion against companionship, but a natural outcome of knowing herself deeply. This independence grows quietly inside her, built from the moments she held herself together, the wounds she healed without applause, the nights she comforted herself through uncertainty. Over time, she discovers that this self-reliance is not about closing her heart, but about opening it from a place where nothing inside her is abandoned. Her choices become guided by her inner truth rather than by fear or longing, and this shift gives her a kind of emotional sovereignty that cannot be taken from her. In this sovereignty, she realizes that love is no longer a negotiation between two incomplete people searching for a missing piece. Instead, it becomes a meeting between two individuals who know who they are and what they bring. This understanding allows her to approach love with clarity rather than confusion. She does not use love as a distraction from herself because she no longer needs to escape her own inner world. She has learned to be with herself, to understand her desires, to face her insecurities, and to nurture her growth. This internal relationship forms the foundation of her outer relationships, making her presence in love steady, grounded, and deeply genuine. Her independence also gives her the freedom to love without fear. She no longer fears losing herself because she knows how to hold on to her identity. She no longer fears being alone because she has already learned to thrive in it. She no longer fears emotional vulnerability because she has developed the inner strength to support herself through it. Her heart remains open, but it is an openness supported by the roots she has planted within her own soul. These roots allow her to love not from desperation or dependency, but from choice, intention, and emotional maturity. She understands that real love is not about clinging, it is about sharing the fullness of who she is while respecting the fullness of the other person. When she enters a relationship, she brings an emotional clarity that transforms the dynamic. She knows how to communicate her needs without hesitation, how to listen without losing herself, how to give without feeling drained, how to receive without guilt. Her independence allows her to love in a way that is balanced, reciprocal, and conscious. She does not rely on the other person to rescue her from her own thoughts or emotions, because she has already learned how to navigate them herself. This makes her presence in a relationship calming rather than chaotic, steady rather than reactive. She becomes a partner who can offer genuine intimacy because she does not seek to fill a void. She seeks to expand a connection. Her sense of wholeness also changes the kind of love she attracts. She draws individuals who are not threatened by her strength, who do not seek to control her independence, who appreciate her depth and emotional integrity. Superficial connections fall away naturally because they cannot meet her at the level she now stands. She is no longer drawn to relationships based on emotional hunger or unhealed wounds. Instead, she gravitates toward those who value mutual respect, emotional responsibility, and personal growth. Her independence sets the tone for the kind of love she allows into her life. As she continues to grow in this wholeness, she becomes more attuned to her inner boundaries. She can feel immediately when a situation pulls her away from her center. She can sense when someone's presence disrupts her emotional balance. She becomes skilled at protecting her peace without shutting people out. Her boundaries are not walls but expressions of self-awareness. They allow her to stay open while staying grounded, to remain compassionate without becoming depleted. This balance is a reflection of the deep work she has done within herself, learning how to honor her inner world while engaging with the outer one. Her independence also shapes the way she approaches conflict. She no longer avoids difficult conversations out of fear. She understands that conflict, when approached with honesty and respect, can lead to deeper connection. She does not explode in anger or collapse into silence. Instead, she stands in her truth while remaining open to the truth of the other. This emotional maturity is a product of the countless moments she has spent observing her own reactions, understanding her own triggers, and learning how to respond instead of react. Her wholeness allows her to navigate conflict without losing her emotional equilibrium. She also becomes more patient with love. She no longer rushes into relationships out of impulse or loneliness. She allows connection to develop slowly, trusting that anything meaningful will grow at its own pace. She honors the unfolding instead of forcing it. She pays attention to the subtle signs of compatibility, respect, emotional intelligence, and shared values. Her independence gives her the courage to walk away when something does not align with her inner truth. She knows that staying in the wrong relationship is lonelier than being alone. This clarity protects her from repeating old patterns and opens the path for deeper, healthier connections. Her love becomes richer because it is not clouded by unmet needs or unhealed wounds. It becomes freer because it is not chained to fear or dependency. It becomes more authentic because it emerges from a foundation of self-awareness. She no longer loves with the hope of being saved. She loves with the intention of sharing her inner world with someone capable of meeting it. Her independence allows her to bring her full self into a relationship, not half of herself waiting to be completed. This is why her love becomes powerful, grounding, and transformative for both her and those she chooses to share it with. Her wholeness also allows her to embrace the natural ebb and flow of connection. She understands that love moves through cycles, distance and closeness, silence and dialogue, introspection and expression. She is not threatened by these shifts because she does not view them as evidence of loss. Her emotional security allows her to hold space for growth, change, and evolution within the relationship. She knows that love does not remain static. It expands and contracts like breath. Her independence gives her the strength to allow these changes without clinging or resisting. Through all of this, she begins to embody a love that feels stable, calm, and deeply rooted. It is a love that does not demand constant reassurance because it is supported by her inner certainty. It is a love that does not fear vulnerability because it is grounded in self-trust. It is a love that does not become lost in the other because it remains anchored in self-awareness. Her independence does not diminish her ability to connect. It refines it, strengthening every emotional bond she forms. And so her life becomes a reflection of this inner alignment, a quiet declaration that love deepens not when one depends on another to be whole, but when one learns to stand whole within oneself, allowing connection to become an expansion of that inner fullness rather than an escape from it.